I'm Andy Mort, and this is the Gentle Rebel podcast, where we explore the ways high sensitivity, creativity, and contemporary culture interplay and intersect. In this episode, we're going to talk about adventure, and I'm joined by my friend Sarah Lister to think about our relationship with adventure in everyday life. She's based in the Peak District in the UK and works as a life and career coach, offering sessions while walking around the valleys and the hills. And I really love the approach that she takes to her coaching business, and really wanted to get her on the podcast to talk about the characteristics of adventure, why she's drawn to the concept, why she uses it as a way to kind of frame what she does, and how it impacts all of us, I think. It kind of expand the way that we might think about adventure for ourselves in the things that bring us to life in different ways. I think we all have a very different kind of spirit of adventure, and we get into kind of talking about what those elements are that make up our individual, our personal spirit of adventure. And this conversation also got me thinking about the way that we hold stories, and it resonates really deeply with something that I'm exploring with Kendra Patterson at the moment. We have a workshop coming up next week as I'm recording this, when we're going to be kind of comparing the hero's journey story structure with the story structure of Kisho Tenketsu, which is a Japanese narrative structure. And I'm, really excited to examine the impact of storytelling on the way that we kind of relate to ourselves, relate to one another, hold our ambitions and goals and judgments about ourselves and other people. And I will tell you more about that workshop. I'm not going to use up too much time now, but I want to share more about that after the conversation. So if you're interested to hear more about that, then stick around after my interview with Sarah Lister finishes, and I'll explain more about what to expect from that. And I think it should make more sense as well in light of what we talk about in this conversation in today's episode. So yes, I will let the conversation play. I hope you enjoy it. Sarah Lister, welcome to the Gentle Rebel podcast. I kind of feel like we should be recording this while out on a walk in the mountains, but, logistics and stuff. So we're venturing into the virtual realm instead and talking over Zoom, which is also delightful. So hi, welcome.
Thank you. And I have just come back from the mountains. So I feel literally just got back yesterday. So I feel like I've just landed straight from that trip. And it feels like perfect timing to be recording this now.
And to not be going back up the mountains.
I'm not ready yet. My kit is still soaking wet.
Oh, man. So where have you been?
I was in the Cairngorms with my friend Jonathan, who's actually an old school friend of mine and part of my childhood, and we've reconnected since he's moved to the Peak District.
Oh, cool.
And he's always loved going to Scotland, and we've talked for years about going on a trip, and he's helped me come up with an itinerary and all these things, and then eventually we went on this trip together, and it was very much led by him, which was really nice because I just felt like I was on a bit of a holiday, really.
Oh, nice.
And it was such an amazing landscape, and we had challenging weather to handle. Yeah, it was quite out of my comfort zone, but I think that's a really good thing, because I don't know what's possible for me in that sort of landscape. So it's just finding out and doing that with a friend who's more competent in that area. He's a mountain leader.
Right.
It just feels really nice to share it and to feel like you've put your trust in someone.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's a great place to be starting this conversation, because I really want to talk to you about the idea of adventure and, I guess, doing things that are out of our comfort zones, and that relationship that we have with that stuff. And I suppose more generally, like the appeal and the purpose and the meaning of adventure in life. It's a word that's always had quite a strong pull for me. I think it underpins my spirit of gentle rebellion and my creative curiosity, and the way I hold possibilities and respond to opportunities and unexpected happenings that occur in life. But it also does carry some weight, I think, for people. So like the idea of adventure might be, oh, that's something other people do, people who are more equipped or better at responding to adversity and uncertainty and that kind of thing. So I'd love to explore it in a way that just helps everyone listening connect with adventure in their own way and really get a sense of what that means for them. So as we set off on this little adventure, I think this conversation is going to be a bit of an adventure because you've got a bit of a structure, but the things I'd like to touch on, but I thought we'll freestyle it a little bit. But just to start, I'd love to hear what brought you to where you are, what you kind of what your day-to-day looks like, and how it all comes under that banner of About the Adventure, your website, which you clearly are all about the adventure. So what's the story so far that brought you to where you are?
Well, I grew up in Norfolk on a farm, which, although it was set in one location mostly, I felt like it was an adventure to live there. There was so much to explore in terms of nature and in terms of the landscape. And because we felt quite safe there, because we weren't really close to any roads, there was farm machinery. But generally, my parents gave us quite a lot of freedom to be outside, to be walking with the dogs, spending hours outside nearby, but far enough away from home to feel like we could be in our own little world and explore our imagination. And I'd go out writing and drawing and just spending time daydreaming. And I remember this really lovely old, like, derelict church that was right on the farm very near to our house. And I used to go there so much as a kid. And it maybe sounds a bit spooky to sort of sit in a churchyard and look around it and read the gravestones and sit in the church that didn't have a roof and it was all overgrown. And it sounds really spooky, but actually I didn't find it spooky at all. I found it like a little haven, to relate to your word. It did feel like a haven, and I really did imagine things there. I saw wildlife, but I also imagined wildlife. And it was such a beautiful, peaceful place. And I used to spend a lot of time there on my own. I spent a lot of time with my sister as well. I think we had our adventures together, bombing about on bikes and sort of messing about. She has a maybe different energy to me. She's a bit more bold and she likes sort of faster adventures, and whereas I'm more of a sort of gentle, maybe more leaning towards the sort of creative, slower type. So sometimes we'd come together and she'd maybe push me and then sometimes we'd have our own adventures. And that was very much the setting for my whole childhood. But then when I was 17, I saved up to go traveling. And I can't quite pin where that inspiration came from. I think it was partly my mum, who had said that she wanted to go to Australia when she was younger, and her friend didn't end up going, and so she didn't end up going. And so I think maybe that inspired me to go. And she said to me, don't ever wait for anybody, like, go off and do your own thing, because I think she felt that she held back from something she wanted to do. So I think that gave me determination to set off and go to Australia. And I had a round the world ticket and traveled to various different destinations on my own. And I think I was partly inspired by reading Hilary Edmond's book. Edmund Hillary? I can't remember. Edmund Hillary or Hilary Edmond?
Edmund Hillary.
Yeah. Edmund Hillary, about Everest. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think there was I can't pinpoint one thing, but there was something that inspired me to save up money and go on this round the world trip. And my parents, especially my mum, really supported that. I remember we went to Cambridge and went into the Trailfinders tourist shop and sat down at their computer and planned out the trip, and they helped
Yeah.
me buy some like walking trousers and waterproofs and things like that. And I saved up by working in a care home. And I think I was earning about £4 an hour, and I was doing that around my A levels.
Mm.
So I worked really hard. I worked really hard for my A levels, worked really hard at the care home, absolutely loved my job at the care home. It was tough, but I loved looking after people.
Was that
And
a caring role that you were doing? Yeah.
yeah, like the sort of day-to-day care of getting people up out of bed and
Mm.
yeah, helping them eat their meals and putting them to bed. Yeah, and night
Yeah.
shifts, all sorts. And I went off on my trip, which was absolutely amazing. And I hadn't really spent a lot of time away from my life in Norfolk, apart from going to Reading Festival and to London maybe a few times. I hadn't, and my parents did take me on holiday to Spain and Greece when I was around 15, 16. Oh, that definitely inspired me actually for this round the world trip. Those
Right.
holidays, first time ever abroad, I think when I was 15, going to Spain. And that was emotional. That was wonderful.
Mm.
And so that definitely inspired me to travel as well. And the round the world trip was incredible. All sorts of mixed experiences of staying in hostels. I worked in Australia doing courgette picking, grape picking for wine, met all sorts of people staying in hostels, kept journals for the whole thing. Basically, it was 9 months of travel, and yeah, it was incredible. I went to Fiji, America, Canada, Bahrain, Singapore, but the
Wow.
main and New Zealand, but I spent the main part in Australia because I loved it so much.
Mm.
And then when I came back, I said, right, that's it. I'm going to travel for the rest of my life. I was so happy to be out of education. And yeah, my parents were, especially my mum, they encouraged me to go to university. They said, you really need an education. I think they both regretted some of their decisions when they were, in their sort of early 20s or before then.
Right.
And so they sort of pushed me towards going to university, and I got through clearing after my travels and went to university. And that was a very mixed thing as well. I found it really hard, but I did choose to study really hard at the start, and then I think I got tired of that after 3 years into my fourth year. I traveled again. I went to live in Spain as part of my degree. And again, I felt like that trip in Spain, that year in Spain, in some ways it was really good, but in some ways I sort of felt like I was off balance because I felt that feeling of travel again. And I thought, I don't want to be in an institution. I don't want to go back to university for my fourth year. But then I did. And I really struggled that year because I didn't really
Right.
want to be there. And I was behaving more like a fresher in my final year because I didn't really care about it anymore. Whereas in my first year, I'd studied really hard. So I did it all backwards.
Yeah.
So in my fourth year, I think I really, really lost my way and I felt trapped.
Right.
And I knew that it was an important year to finish, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I found it really hard. And yeah, I wasn't going to classes as much. I got into drinking. It was not fun. And I think I thought I was having fun, but actually I was lost.
Mm.
And then after that, and then I got into a relationship, and then I got stuck. I got really stuck for like 10 years doing the whole university thing because my partner was still at university. I'm not saying that anyone was to blame for this. It was just my choices, my choices, my journey that I needed to go through. But those 10 years were not good. I didn't have good experiences in my work life. and I didn't really know who I was or where I wanted to be. I sort of felt like I wanted to be in that relationship, but also there was a lot of things that wasn't good about it for me, and I felt very insecure. So it was a really tough few years, and I stopped traveling. Basically, I stopped traveling in the way that I had, with the freedom and the excitement. It was more like holidays in Greece type of thing. It wasn't the type of travel that I'd envisaged for
Mm.
myself. And I got my confidence through my work experiences got really crushed. I didn't get on well with my bosses. I found life really hard. I felt like I was trying so hard in all my relationships, in my romantic relationships, in my work relationships, in my friendships, and none of it was working. And then after some years, I felt like I needed some help. So I I was seeking something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I didn't want to stay in what I was in where I was. So I was looking at things on Meetup, on the Meetup website, and started to open up to meeting new people, and discovered this amazing coach who did a talk in London. She was living in Malawi, but she came to London to do some talks, and then she'd find her clients to work with and then do that from Malawi.
Mm.
And that's when everything changed, and I started to re-engage with my sense of adventure. And it started very slowly. It started with local walks, going on hikes with leaders and with groups, and meeting new people. And that is where it started. That's where I consider it kind of started to where I am now, which is not living in a city. It's living in the Peak District, surrounded by hills, that has brought me so many opportunities of adventure, and to learn about navigation, to learn about myself, to meet other people who love travel and adventure. But it's been a long journey of rediscovering myself and stepping away from the things that I thought I wanted
Mm.
before, like in those 10 years that were tricky.
Mm.
So, and it's definitely been through walking and then running and a little bit of travel. I'm not a big traveler at the moment. I haven't been abroad for a long time, but I have been traveling to places like Wales and to Scotland. So I do consider that traveling and meeting new people. And that's actually only really started to gain momentum this year. So, and so that's been over the past 6 years that this whole
Right.
re-entering, but it feels different to how it was before, because I think before I just thought that all I wanted was travel, and I just wanted to keep moving all the time. I didn't want to settle. But now I'm realizing that actually I like both. I like to
Mm.
have a home and a settling place and secure relationships around me, but I also love to explore and go to new places. So
Mm.
yeah, now it's more finding that balance.
Yeah. So like having that almost that hub for, and then sort of moving out and then coming back, and yeah, I get that. It's like a tide image, or like a breath, yeah, expanding and contracting, and yeah, I love that. Yeah, so much in there that to relate to, really, like that. Yeah, just picking up on that. I thought I was having fun, but really I was lost. And I think that that idea of being lost but not realizing you're lost is quite an interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like reflecting back on it. It just feels, I almost feel like, who was that? Who
Hmm.
It's really, and not that I think that I was bad or terrible or anything like that. It's not, it doesn't come from like a punishing place, more like a curious place, like,
Hmm.
how did you, and it was that feeling of, yeah, just feeling completely lost, like losing my way. I felt like I really lost my way, and it started with going to university. I felt like I went against everything that I knew that I wanted. I felt so
Right.
certain about that I wanted to work and travel, and that's how I wanted to. And maybe, maybe I would have got tired of that if I'd have done it. But at the time, I felt so certain. And by going to university, I almost feel like I betrayed myself, because I went to university and locked myself in my room and studied really hard. And the contrast of that, of like the year before, of movement and travel and fun. And I'm not saying it was all good, when I was traveling, there were I still felt a bit lost.
Yeah.
I think everyone does though when they're like 18 years old. And I yeah, but that was I think that's how I was exploring myself and learning about myself. Who was I without living with my family? And it was like away from my safety net of home and work. And so I felt like I was exploring and finding out who I was. And then by going to university, I felt trapped, and I felt like if I was there, I had to do it really well, I had to do it really good.
Right.
So I kind of knuckled down and thought, right. But then after 2 years of doing that, then going to Spain, I lost my way again, because, well, Spain's just such a different culture. It's so chilled out. It's such a different attitude to work and to life. And I really got into that. So then coming back again to an institution it was really hard. And I
Mm.
think I was so lost that I was looking for something, and got into this relationship. And I ended up being in that relationship for years and years and years. And there were really lovely things about it, a really good like first relationship, but it wasn't it wasn't really me. uh,
Mm.
it wasn't what I'm realizing now looking back, is it wasn't really what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost sounds like with the adventure and the travel, there's like a switch that's flicked and a light comes on, and it's like, yeah, you can see who you are. Like, I get a real sense of like aliveness in that. And then in these other places, that maybe it's like a dimmer switch, and you don't necessarily even notice it going off, but just dials down, and yeah, that part of you is turned to dark, like, or it's kind of in the shadows. And yeah,
Yeah, it's a really
that.
good way of explaining it, actually. And I felt like when I was in Scotland with my friend, it's I experienced myself in such a different way. I mean, I was just
Right.
laughing so much, to the point where I was like almost falling over and just so giddy. And even though it was, like, and it was hard as well. There were times when I was grumpy and finding it really hard in the driving rain and worrying about getting too cold and all those things. But it's like suddenly, yeah, you become really visible to yourself.
Yeah.
It's like I'm witnessing all these different emotions and and things happening and being with another person,
Mm.
which when I'm doing my everyday, yeah, stuff, if I do
Yeah.
it for so long, it's like I become more insular into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I relate to that so much. And it's, you said a few times, like, it's still hard. There's still hard aspects of it, but it's kind of like when you zoom out and assess the bigger picture, it's like, but I wouldn't choose to be anywhere else. I wouldn't
Yeah.
choose to be doing anything else. And hard, hard struggle, challenge, that's part of life. And yeah, kind of integrating that into that bigger picture is all key to that. So in terms of the word itself, adventure, what does it mean to you personally?
I mean, I feel like I can have an adventure literally just straight from my door, even though I've explored this area relatively well, especially my immediate area. I live in this lovely village called Edale, which is basically between this lovely ridge, the Mamtor Ridge, and then the highest point in Derbyshire, which is Kinderscow. And I can literally walk out or run out of my door and get up into the hills and experience a completely different environment through the elements that can feel really different, the perspective that I have. And, that can be within 20 minutes. I can get up on the hill. And so I feel like adventure is, because every time, even though it's close to home, I still experience it as a challenge. I have, even though it's pretty much my everyday, I still find it challenging sometimes to find the energy, whether it's energy or whether it's, oh, what if people are looking at me? Like all these things that go on. Like what if I haven't got enough energy to do this today? Or what if someone sees me and thinks I look stupid? Or all these different things that go on in your mind that you never really like voice to people. But there's always something going on. And so I think adventure is partly about trust. I think it's partly about trust. It's like building trust in yourself and getting out of the sort of false comfort of just staying indoors and hiding away from the world, which I could very much do, growing up. And that's what I used to do. I was such a shy kid. I hated putting myself out there in front of. I used to do ballet and I hated performing. I hated speaking up in class. I didn't like being away from my parents. And I could retreat at home because it was on a farm far away from villages, and I could go into my little imaginary world and read books and hide away in my bedroom or go to the churchyard. I'm not saying that we didn't have lots of people around us, because my parents are pretty sociable and they always encouraged me to do loads of evening activities. But to be honest, I was quite resistant to it, especially as a child, because I was just so scared. I was so nervous. My confidence really was not very good as a kid. And so that it's like trusting that I'm going to be okay. It's part of my childhood that's still in me. And so the adventure is pushing myself out of that false feeling of comfort and safety. And I don't mean to the point of, like a threat to my life or anything like that. It's just going for a walk or going for a run. But I feel like it does always feel like an adventure, and then the experience of it. And I'm so open to the experience each time. And if I haven't got enough energy, then I chat to myself about it. I sort of ask myself, well, maybe it will come in time, maybe it'll come after an hour, and sometimes it does. Or maybe actually you need to cut it shorter today and go home and rest, and then trust that it will come another day. So, and it is very much part of my everyday, and it does feel like an adventure in terms of the people that I meet on the way, or sometimes meeting no people, being up on Kinder Scout and actually seeing nobody, and the adventure of that, of just feeling like you're in the middle of nowhere. And other times when you meet lots of people and you might have the most profound conversation with somebody that you meet. It's like, to me, it's a way of life now.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's that, I guess we use the terms like sense of adventure and spirit of adventure, and I'm hearing maybe like, that it's a desire, and like to link it back to that university decision and the experience in Australia, and that real sense that, no, I just want to travel for the rest of my life. And then that gets kind of pushed down a bit when it's like, well, I should probably do the sensible thing and go to university and, get that education. But then it's listening to, okay, what is that spirit of adventure? Where does that spirit of adventure want to take me? And then it's having that conversation with yourself. Okay, yeah, we'll go, let's try and get going today, or whatever. And it's not you're not forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do. You're working out how to partner with that spirit of adventure in order to do what it wants to do and what you ultimately want to do. Which is fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like getting out of the sort of routine life, because that doesn't serve me. I know that it's not like I'm always looking for, like, there are endorphins involved. But it doesn't feel, I don't feel like I'm always looking for like a pick me up or a hit, or because sometimes it doesn't feel like that at all. It can be a really gentle sort of seeking of just, yeah. And I used to watch a lot of television and films, and I'm not saying that's bad to do that, but I've really distanced away from that. And I think it's partly because because of where I live, I can choose to, I don't have to like travel really far to have a walk in a really beautiful, stunning place. So I do tend to choose these days to go for a walk, or even to draw a landscape that I've taken a photo of.
Right.
Something like that, rather than leaning into the sort of just flicking on the telly and watching something. I feel like something was missing and I was numbing myself. And I think the thing is that I think I've been, in the past, I've been all or nothing. So it's like, I went on this trip and that was amazing. But then I came back and studied really hard for a couple of years and I became more insular. And then I went off to Spain and it was like a wake up call. And then I sort of just went, I'll stuff the studies more or less, and traveled. And I still learned Spanish because I was living with a Spanish woman and sort of immersed myself in the culture. But I wasn't really studying history, which I did at university. And I had this, like a year of sort of exploration, and changed a bit in terms of my attitude towards work. And then, so I feel like it has been all or nothing. And that's been in terms of like my work as well, where I've just been like, right, I'm going to focus on my career. And I think what I'm realizing is that it is about the spirit of adventure, and that I can bring it in and out to like everyday life, especially living in a place like this.
Yeah, that's the impression I get, and the way that you've, I guess, managed your work as well to incorporate, walking coaching and that kind of thing. That actually you've found a way to integrate that spirit of adventure into everyday life, and it's like your local little adventures locally, and you don't have to kind of make these grand plans to fly to the other side of the world in order to have what might be construed or defined as an adventure. It's like, actually, where can we find adventure in everyday life, and what are the elements? So I'm like hearing, it sounds like nature is an important element of adventure for you. Mate, what are some of the component parts of your like your spirit of adventure? Maybe that's the question.
Definitely spontaneity.
Right.
And that, I do go by the weather a lot. So if I suddenly see like a good, what I would consider a good weather window, then I'll have an idea of something, like whether I want to go for a run or a walk, and I'll maybe have an idea that I'll go in a certain part of the day around my freelance work, but then I will just flip it if I think, or if I just feel like I need to release some energy, or if I'm feeling a bit sleepy and sluggish and working isn't working. And so I'll be like, right, I need to get out and get some fresh air. So I think spontaneity, definitely curiosity. So I think, so for example, my first few times on Kinder Scout, I felt curious about the landscape, the sort of textures and the sandy gritstone the sandy what's it called, sandstone and gritstone and all these different elements that you see and that you're walking on and how it changes.
Mm.
And I felt really curious, but I wasn't so curious to go and find out. But I didn't even know where to begin. Whereas the more time that I've spent here, I've become more curious in terms of the wildlife, the geology, also in terms of navigation, and that helps with the navigation part, helps with spontaneity as well, because I can change my route now. Whereas before, when I first moved here, I just stuck to the routes that I'd got to know
Yeah.
with other people or through, yeah, sort of basic, very basic map skills. But spontaneity has really helped me to, sorry, navigation has helped me with spontaneity in terms of finding different paths, understanding how long it will take if if I go to that other point that I want, that looks great, or there's an inversion over there or something like that.
Mm.
Also carrying enough kit with me so that if I do change my mind, I've got enough water or a filter or enough food to keep me going, and I've got emergency equipment if the weather changes. So, and I carry that with me pretty much all the time.
Right.
So I feel, even though it's spontaneous, I'm still prepared, if you know what I mean. It's
Yeah, it's
like,
a really interesting,
yeah.
yeah, because I think about and like hearing ideas around confidence there, and like the growing confidence in those, your ability to go navigate pathways that you haven't done before necessarily, and yeah, to be more spontaneous, and where confidence comes from. We often think about it just from a feeling perspective, but actually the confidence is in that kit bag. It's in the fact that, no, I know I've got the stuff that I will need in case of some kind of emergency or
Mm-hmm.
adversity or a change in the weather. And actually we then can place our confidence into objects, into other things that, yeah, mean
Yeah,
that,
exactly. It's like, because otherwise you feel limited.
yeah,
It's like you have the spontaneous idea, but you can't meet it. And if you,
yeah,
I mean, of course you can, maybe. Some people might be like, oh, I'll just hope that I get back before it's dark, or I'll figure something out. And sometimes, yeah, you can do that, but to be prepared, to have the torch, to have enough water and food and
mm,
an extra layer. Yes, it's more effort to carry. And sometimes I sort of think, oh, so it's a bit of a heavy pack if I'm only going out for, but then I've been so grateful
mm,
for it when I'm out there,
yeah,
when I have decided, when I have changed my mind and I felt like I've got more energy and can keep
yeah,
going. And I think another part, another element of adventure for me has definitely been other people, because otherwise I just wouldn't be where I am now, in terms of that other people have inspired me, taught me the navigation skills,
mm,
inspired me. But also the people who I meet on the hills are just
yeah,
the little stories that you capture along the way, and it's just incredible. And
mm,
last year I did the Heriot Way walk, and I did it gently, slowly, and I was just walking along the river one day and I felt a bit tired. I think it was quite hot. I think it was in August, and just as I was about to turn off up this sort of steady hill, I saw these two women sat next to their car having a picnic. And I was like, oh, that's so lovely. And I just stopped to rehydrate. So I took my pack off and I was stood there rehydrating. And then one of them approached me and said, "Would you like to join us for a pot of tea?" And they literally had like a china pot of tea with these china cups, and I was just like, "Yes,
That's
please."
the most British thing ever.
I know. And honestly, it sounds so romantic, and it felt so romantic. It was just incredible. So I went and sat with them, and we just had the most. It turned out they were sisters, and they were celebrating one of their birthdays,
Right.
and it was just such a wonderful conversation. I mean, I'll remember that for the rest of my life, because it was so kind that they invited me, and they said that they felt so inspired that I was walking on my own through this landscape. And I took a lovely picture of them, and then we swapped numbers, and I sent it to them, and we kept in touch a little bit afterwards. And so it's things like that. It's like that can literally make my day, an experience like that, or someone sharing a story. And yeah, that to me, that's like the point of life.
I love
Is
that.
like these
Yeah,
encounters, they're
absolutely.
just so special. And that's just one example of hundreds over the years. Of course,
Yeah,
they're not all good. Like you have some weird experiences out there as well, and you have to. And that's the thing. It's all kind of you're putting yourself open to chance to some degree.
yeah.
But it's amazing how most of the time they are really good and rich experiences, I found, and they are far much more memorable as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got nature, we've got people. Yeah. That's really, it's really interesting, because that's certainly an example of something that you can't contrive, and you can't, you might think, oh, I'm going to go on an adventure, and I want to go and meet somebody. And it's like, you probably won't see anybody if you've set that as your desire. But it is just that openness to, even just to saying, oh yeah, I'll join you for a pot of tea. Because like that, your instant reaction might be, oh no, that's a bit strange. And so I guess that spirit of adventure needs to incorporate, if you want it to, a sense of openness to the spontaneous, to the things that present themselves to you as little openings, little open doors or whatever. And then you don't know where this might lead. And yeah, to me, that's a big part of adventure, is that the enjoyment of uncertainty in that sense. And that is where the meaning of life is hatched for me as well. And that takes me on to just thinking, like, often, certainly with like adventure stories and those kinds of things, there's often like this destination or this outcome or a goal that is at the heart of it, or we place at the heart, like, a quest or something like that. But I'm, getting a sense from what you've said so far that that's actually not really what drives you. I wonder, like, what is the relationship with adventure and outcomes and goals and that kind of thing for you?
Yeah, it's definitely changed, because I remember when I was first starting to think about a career change, I was working as a data analyst in London, and I had been basically walking around Greenwich Park every weekend, which is really beautiful, and then going to work during the week, and that was my thing. And I'd go for drinks. I'd go for alcoholic drinks on a Friday night, and probably get drunk most of the time, and then spend Saturday hungover, probably watch some television, and then Sunday go for a walk around the park and get something at Greenwich Market. And that was just how things were for a long time.
Yeah.
And so when I started to enter this, or to be curious about adventure through starting to walk and going to some adventure talks and hearing people talk, especially a lot of men talking about these great adventures they'd been on and then telling their stories, I did start to go think in that direction. Like, I need to do something grand. I need to go on some kind of quest, and that was very much the direction that I was sort of thinking about and moving towards. But there was something about it, well, there were some things about it that didn't quite fit with me. And I think it was partly the thought of kind of putting my head down and having to work really hard and save loads of money while I was living in London and already in debt, to then take a lot of time off, because I was thinking probably something abroad and it would cost, money to travel and things. So it was the work really hard and then go. It didn't fit with me because I wasn't, I didn't have the stamina to work really hard, pay off all my debts and save money and wait that long. And so I think that's when I started to, well, I used to call them mini adventures, and I even incorporated them into my lunch breaks. So I worked in Vauxhall in London, and in my lunch break I'd try and squeeze in as much as I could into that hour that I had free. So I'd take the tube somewhere new every day or every other day and try and squeeze as much as I could, like a walk around a different park or visiting a city zoo. I did all sorts of things. I went to all sorts of museums and galleries, and it was brilliant. I felt like I'd tapped into some kind of top secret. Because it changed my whole perspective on my day, from after I'd been sitting with colleagues who were just moaning about the job or talking about whatever. I felt like I was actually having little mini adventures. And I sort of discovered it as a way of life. And then I started doing it at weekends. So rather than just going with hiking groups, I started to look at places that I could go down to, like the South Coast. And I would plan these day adventures. And, I'd get up at like 6 a.m, get a train somewhere, walk along the coast for the day, and then jump on a train back. And then I'd write about it. And I find writing about it is so immersive. It feels like then the adventure hasn't ended. You come back and it's like you can go into it in even more depth, in even more detail. And I think it's like the trip in Scotland I've just been on. Well, we stayed overnight in a bothy, and we'd arrived in really hard rain and we were really tired, and we had a whole like afternoon and evening to just kind of chill out. So I went and had a nap on this sort of bunk in the bothy, and there were other people arriving at this bothy, and I was in this sort of sleepy state. And I remember hearing this Scottish man, and he sounded really friendly and really lovely, and I could hear him talking to other people in the bothy. And all I've been thinking about ever since is that I never saw his face.
Oh, right.
And it's like because I had all my things hanging to dry. And I was sleeping, I was like drowsy and sleeping and coming in and out of sleep. So I heard this voice, and it was such a lovely, Scottish accent, a lovely soft voice. And I thought he sounded so nice and so kind, the way he spoke to the other people. And he wrote a note in the Bothy book, but it's like he's just this voice, and I can still hear him, but I don't have no idea what he looked like. And it's those sorts of things, like I really want to write about that, because somehow that's really significant for me. It's just this voice that he didn't have a face.
Sort of disembodied voice.
And it's things like that. It's things that I love to write about afterwards. And so I don't feel like I get to, of course there is an ending to an adventure when the time that you stop walking, or that you arrive at the pub at the end and you hang all your stuff up and you're having a meal and it's over, or they come to an end. But I also feel like they come with me. It's like they're part of me and so memorable. And like I say, I write about them and I draw pictures from, I sketch from photographs, and
Right.
I retell stories. So I feel like they're very much alive, and I don't feel like a really strong sense of accomplishment, or that I've achieved something incredible in
Mm.
terms of the distance or the elevation or the end result. I'm not saying I don't ever feel proud of what I'm doing, but it does feel like it's just yeah, it's like it's like part of a story.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. It sounds like it's a really fluid, ongoing thing. And then, yeah, kind of drawing back to those moments in the church with no roof and your imagination and all of that stuff. Like, actually, that's sounds like that's still very much alive, and that's part of the spirit of adventure. Because I was, yeah, curious about the imagination. You talked about being able to sort of retreat into it, or like not go out into adventure, and whether that was because I think the imagination can be a really enriching source of adventure at times, but not if it's taking us away from the things that we, if we're using it as a crutch so that we don't have to confront the things that we want to go and do, or that we need to go and do. But it sounds like you've again integrated that into part of that kind of in breath and out breath of adventure itself, and the writing and the drawing, and yeah, I love that. And then it's a fluid, rather than these big expensive set piece adventures that people talk about going and conquering things and overcoming stuff and all of that kind of thing. And actually, yeah, it's kind of said before we started recording, kind of use this term of like dancing with adventure. It sounds more like that, like partnering with this spirit of adventure to yeah, it's like is it the Sherpas talk about, Everest holding them, like people from the West come and talk about like we're going to go and conquer the mountain, and they talk about like the mountain holds us, like we're engaging in that dance, we're partnering with the natural world in order to sort of elevate the potential of humanity and elevate nature and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, we have this very, it's almost like a violent way of talking sometimes about adventures, where it's like, I'm going to go and overcome and conquer, and yeah, very kind of militaristic words around it. But yeah.
I find it hard to be around that type of energy. I think it's just different. It's not something that I think is bad. It's just not, it's not the way that I experience being in those types of landscapes.
Right. Yeah.
And I've definitely felt held by mountains or by valleys, and I've just fallen asleep next to rivers, and I felt really safe and very much held, and or sitting like on a warm boulder
Right.
and just feeling so relaxed, feeling part of the landscape rather than yeah, like you say, kind of conquering
Yeah.
it. I'm not on some kind, and there's no, I don't feel like I have a final destination with it. I'm not building up towards anything or training for anything. This is pure enjoyment, and it still challenges me, and it challenges my body, and I've learned to look after my body to support what I want to do. And I'm sure that I'll keep doing that as I get older.
Yeah.
I'll find new ways of like looking after the niggles and yeah, I do enjoy pushing myself, and sometimes I do like being with people who push themselves a bit harder than I normally would push myself. But I really don't enjoy it when people try to rush me. Of
Right.
course, sometimes if it's a case of darkness approaching or really bad weather, or, like in those circumstances, of course. But if it's a case of someone just wanting to reach the end and, you know, just get back home early, I don't enjoy that, because I feel then that that it's against why I'm out there.
Yeah.
I'm not able to fully experience it in the way that I usually do.
That's great. I really love that. Yeah. And being part of the landscape, you know, in our own nature, like, yeah, such a lovely way of describing that. Yeah, I was kind of thinking, like, I would hate to be, you know, in a sea or on a mountain, and the mountain know that I have this attitude of, like, I'm here to conquer you and to fight you, because it's like, I don't stand a chance of winning that fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Time is a rushing on. I would love to just talk a little bit about the guidebook that you've written for Kinder Scout, and how did that come about? And was that part of a plan, or?
I wouldn't say a plan. A few years ago, the thought passed through my mind how lovely it would be to write a guidebook, but it's never something that I seriously considered or thought that I could do. And it really wasn't part of the grand plan. There was no plan, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I do I have appreciated using guidebooks before I learned navigation skills, and sometimes I still use them, even if it's just for inspiration. And then I turn to the map and go, okay, how can I shift this around? But it was definitely, when the consideration came to me, it was definitely powerful. It was something that I felt rather than thought really about. It was, wow, how cool would that be? But it was never anything that I shared with anybody, and I didn't ever write down routes or anything like that. But then I happened to meet the managing director of a local publisher when I was on a walk with a guidebook writer. So they're friends, and this managing director, he'd already had the idea of producing this guidebook for Kinder Scout. They're based in Sheffield. And also a series of mountain walk books, guidebooks for like Snowdon and Scafell, and I didn't know that he had that idea, but we met. We got chatting about Kinder and about my podcast, which is about people's connections with Kinder Scout. It's a really iconic place for a lot of people. Not just iconic, it means different things to different people. Sometimes people use it for like creative inspiration or to process grief. There's all sorts of, reasons why people come specifically to Kinder Scout, and that's what I'm exploring through my podcast. And then we talked about that a bit, and I think he then went away and listened to it and followed me on Twitter, where I was posting pictures of Kinder Scout, sunsets and all sorts of things. And then I think he just thought, well, I've got this idea. And he very casually put the idea to me. And so that's where it grew from. And I just saw it, I saw it as such an amazing opportunity, because I'd learned my navigation skills and spent so much time here, and because of my podcast and learning about how different people value the landscape and also the area and the village. And I just thought it was such an incredible opportunity that just landed out of the blue, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And that combination of, I guess, the stories of people's relationship with it, combined with the practical element of the roots and all of that kind of stuff makes for something really meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that I very nearly didn't go on that walk. I was thinking about, even though I really like the writer who was arranging it, there were a few different reasons, and one of them was that the location where they were starting from wasn't direct to get to
Right.
with using public transport. And I don't drive, I don't have a car, or never learned to drive. And so straight away I was thinking, oh, I can't get there. But then I turned that into an adventure.
Okay.
So I got a train to one of the local villages, and then I plotted out a route to walk to the starting point. And it was so beautiful. It's like through a woodland. I explored a whole new area. And so even before I'd arrived to go for the walk, I'd already had this amazing adventure. Arrived early, sat there with my coffee, and I bought some stuff for lunch. And so I felt like I was in a really good space when I arrived there as well.
That's good.
And I was so close to not going on
Mm.
that walk. And that would have possibly meant that opportunity may never have come up.
Yeah. Strange to think of those sorts of things, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
The things you would never know you have missed out on, but yeah, the things that were very close to not existing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
fascinating.
now I'm friends with the publisher. He's the managing director,
Yeah.
and we've been on sunrise runs, sunset runs. We go out walking together, and it's just, life is just, it can be so incredible. Like what can come from walking, not just walking. Obviously there's all sorts of ways you can do new things. It can be through going to an art class, or all sorts of things. But yeah, it does fascinate me. I think it's adventure is it's like kind of seeing past the apparent limitations that sometimes we sort of block our view with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's amazing how much kind of, when you were talking about traveling down to the coast and coming back in and then writing about it in the same day and everything, like how much we can get done in a sense in a short period of time. Like, a couple of weekends ago, traveled to, I mean, it was crazy. We went to Brussels for a night. I went with a friend of mine, and we left at 3:00 in the morning. And by like half eight, we were already, in Brussels, and like everything was, in motion for our trip. And you're thinking, it was 8:30 local time, so it was 7:30 back here in the UK. I was thinking, just sort of getting up at this time, like how far we've come in such a short, like before breakfast, essentially. And that happened like on traveling days. That is so apparent to me always, like how far you can go in a period of time. But at the same time, I have days where I'm just sat in front of my computer, and the whole day goes, and I'm like, I haven't moved anywhere, but it feels like it's gone really fast. And I haven't done anything. And, and it's time itself is a strange thing, but
and actually I think that can be reflected in relationships as well, whether that's with your partner or with your friends. It's like let's say with partners, so you could spend a day out in the mountains, let's say, with your partner, and have the most, if you've got a partner, and have the most amazing day, conversations. You get to see how each other respond, maybe to scrambling or the weather changing. Like, you learn so much about each other. Whereas you could spend maybe months or even years just sitting at home with each other, like you just go, you're just doing your day to day, going to work, one of you cooks a meal, you go to bed. It's like all this kind of routine. And you might feel like you don't really know that person. You're not really connecting with them.
Mm.
Whereas when you spend that time, that quality time, there's something about being outside that opens things up. People, not always. I'm not saying it's like some kind of, people can still be closed when they're
Mm.
outside, if they're not really there with you. But I just think there's like a shift in energy, I think.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Definitely get that. Yeah. Well, I mean, oh yeah, the other thing about the Kinder Scout book, how long did it take to write, and how do you even approach a project like that? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so I was about to move on to that actually, because I did I did well, first of all, I put it off for ages because I was really scared. Obviously, like the excitement of the opportunity was really great,
Mm.
but then there was a sort of waiting for the contract, and then I was being very sort of tentative with it, and I didn't know where to start. And they gave me a template of a description of a walk that was on
Right.
Kinder as a guide of how they might structure it. And yeah, I was absolutely petrified of starting because I didn't know where to start. I didn't know whether to start with the big walks or the shorter walks or the walk that I wanted to do the most, or to start writing. And then like I just didn't
Mm.
I didn't have a sort of guide for it. And I was also doing it around my freelance work. So I kind of focused on my freelance work and thought, yeah, I'll get to the book, and I just sort of procrastinated over it.
Mm.
And then I started from a place of logic of, okay, I'm going to lay out the walks I'm going to do and just go through one by one, do the walk, write it up, and just do that 15 times, which does not fit with my personality whatsoever because I'm spontaneous. I love being outside. I get my creative inspiration from being outside. So I realized after probably about a month that the reason that I was procrastinating was because I was thinking I need to start indoors on my laptop.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that because that was my day-to-day, work, my freelance work, and it wasn't, yeah, it was not me.
Mm.
So I suddenly realized that I needed to start in the place that I love, exploring. And I thought about it from the perspective of partly myself when I first came here and what I expected, what I experienced, what I wanted to know. I sort of went back to me a few years ago when I
Yeah.
didn't have those navigation skills and I was relying on blogs and guidebooks and things like that. But I was also thinking about it. I sort of envisaged someone who's never been up there before,
Mm.
or a family who are going out for the day. And so I started walking and seeing, it was like seeing everything in a new way. So
Right.
it was like an adventure, even though it was on familiar ground,
Yeah.
because I was noticing so much more. And also I noticed where I maybe take shortcuts because I know the area. And actually I was going, oh well, actually that's the official path, and I haven't been down there, or I haven't been down there for ages.
Mm.
And so I was actually experiencing things as new as well, because I was going to be describing the routes to people. So I needed to make it as clear as possible.
Mm.
So yeah, I started with that, with exploring, and actually I didn't do it walk by walk. I didn't complete each one by one in the end. It was an exploration. I went back and forth, and I changed my mind. I reread them. I tried to make them clearer. The first few, after a while, you kind of, with any sort of writing, you become more attuned. So some of the first few that I wrote, I went back to and rewrote them. I kept the basics, and I decided to bring in aspects such as wildlife, and saying in June you might notice the cuckoos
Mm.
calling as you walk along Grimesbrook, or when you're up on the plateau, you might hear the golden plover again in June. June's a great time for hearing the local wildlife. Or when you're crossing this part of Kinder to the northern edge, then you might see a mountain hare if you walk quietly. You're not going to hear them if you've got a dog on the loose, or if you're not going to see them if you're making a lot of noise, because then they'll just hear you and run off. So it's like those little things that I've learned by spending time here, and I thought I will include those, because then people can choose what time of year. And I say things like, you want to choose a day when it's not too windy, so you can hear the golden plover making their little cheap noise so softly, and also taking note of what you might see growing on Kinder Scout, like cotton grass and rose bay willow herbs, and the types of rocks that you might see, and encouraging people to sit down with a flask. This is a great spot to take half an hour if it's nice weather. And so I really wanted people to experience it in a gentle way, that it's not just a case of, right, 15 walks, I'm going to tick all those off.
Yeah.
It's like you can really choose and be curious. And so I really encourage that throughout the book, because I think it can add so much value to the experience.
Yeah. I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah. So much in that, the kind of aspect of seeing something through different eyes, something that you're really, really familiar with, and re-engaging with it through new eyes, and that bringing its own adventure to it. Something, kind of thinking about all kinds of things that become mundane and routine in my own life, that, what if I treated that like I'm someone else, or like I'm coming to it for the first time, or, what would be important to convey, or, sort of focus on, and things like that. I suppose it's the challenge of trying to teach an idea that you're very familiar with, and the ins and outs of it, and actually the challenge of trying to teach something is really huge. Make it simple and make it accessible, and all of that kind of thing. But then, the idea of incorporating that slowing down and that gentleness, and these aren't just walks to tick off, so you've accomplished, you've conquered Kinder Scout, all the walks. But actually, and that being something that can be so different throughout the year as well. And it reminds me of exploring this difference between like expectancy and expectation, and how I use this example of like you're on a walk and you see this beautiful sunset when you're on this walk for the first time, and you think the next week, I'm going to go and see the sunset again, but it's cloudy. And so you have this expectation that you're going to see the sunset, but you don't. And then you're disappointed. Whereas if you take a spirit of expectancy, which you had the first time, it's like, I wonder what I'll see this time.
Yes.
And it just really speaks to that kind of, because you miss, if you're tethered to expectation that you're either going to have a repeat of what happened before, or somebody else has laid down the expectations that you will see the hare, or you will see whatever it is, you will hear this, then you miss all the other things that are actually going on, because you're so focused on, I've got to see this thing.
That's so true. I remember one night it was while I was writing the book, but it wasn't for the book. And I took my camera. I borrowed this camera from someone for a few years. I took this big heavy camera up with me, and my aim was to go and photograph sunset with the camera, because I tended to use my phone. And I was like, I'm going to take the big camera. So I started heading up Mam Tor, and something just told me to take a different route to usual. So I sort of headed up through these trees, and it's a slightly steeper route, but I just fancied something a bit different. I was on this sort of march for sunset, and I was running a bit late, and then I got about halfway up, and suddenly I saw this deer, And I'd never seen a deer here before. You get them in other areas of the Peak District, but I'd never seen one here before.
Mm.
And it was so close and it hadn't seen me. My camera was in my bag because I was thinking, I'm going to get my camera out and get to the top and see sunset. So I remember I just really carefully, quietly placed my bag down. And I got these lovely shots of this young deer. And that is just a perfect example of that. I completely missed, because I got so distracted with that, I completely missed getting up to the top and sunset. But I didn't even care anymore.
That's amazing.
Because this deer had just completely stopped me in my tracks. I've got a photo of it on my Instagram, and it was that encounter with wildlife that I hadn't expected, especially not a deer. And that's happened a few times since, where I've gone up for like sunrise and where I've had a wildlife encounter.
Yeah.
And it really has stopped me in my tracks. So it's so true. And the thing, I mean, generally I don't go out with any particular expectation these days, especially. And it's amazing sometimes I might go out and I think, oh, it's really cloudy, so there's going to be no sunset. And then suddenly just before the sun drops, the clouds clear and something magnificent happens. And you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a great metaphor for different aspects of life, really, and like the things we cling to in expectation, and the things we might miss when we do that. But yeah, also, do we have because I always think about in relation to like productivity hacks and things like that, and like we're often driven to make everything really efficient and so you can fit more in, and actually I love kind of approaching it from the opposite angle, to think, okay, how can productivity tools or whatever help create more time so that when you do see that deer, you can stop and you can take that photo, and that's okay. And you're not then under this massive pressure to, well, I've got to get to the top, I've got to take that sunset picture. And so, I think productivity tools are only useful if they allow us to do what we want to do more slowly, if they allow that margin around them for those moments. Yeah.
I think sometimes, and I say this because it's been my experience in the past as well, I think sometimes people are actually scared of time, of having open, free space time. And they might fantasize about it or say they want it, but actually having it can make you feel really vulnerable if there's nothing filling it. And that's something that I've been sitting with more over the past few months. I think especially when you finish a project like a book, you're writing a book or something similar to that, is that suddenly something, or like training to become something, and suddenly you've arrived there, and then suddenly you feel like you've got more time and more space, and sometimes it can be so tempting to just refill it, but actually it's vulnerable. And so I understand why people, I take people up on Kinder a lot, and I see the discomfort of sitting. I see it in people. They're like, when are we going to go? Like, I'm here for a walk. I'm not here to sit. And I really see it, and I think I can see it because I used to feel like that.
Yeah.
And so I think to get through that vulnerability of sitting with yourself, feeling time and emptiness, and I think if you can trust in that and lean into it, cry if you need to, whatever you need to do, I think you can get to the other side of it, and it feels glorious. But you've got to experience all parts of it to really know it, and to be able to feel the other side of that.
Yeah, that's really it's just reminded me of I saw an image the other day. I think I screenshotted it. There's a woman on my Edinburgh to London train, just doing the journey raw. No book, no laptop, no music. Scrolls her phone a few minutes every hour or so, but otherwise just looks out the window. Incredibly powerful and kind of terrifying. And there's the comments below were like people just like, she sounds like a very scary person. Like she's like a monster or like, and it was really interesting because I can do that. I can sit on a train and just look out the window and see the world passing by like very, very happily. I don't need anything to entertain me. And so I was like, yeah, no, that's great. But yeah, it's like you're describing that sort of the vulnerability and the like I don't know, the maybe even an insecurity of not having something to entertain you, or just boredom, or like, yeah, not, I don't know, it's not in a kind of judgmental way, but it's just a really interesting observation of the way that we hold time and the space when we're not doing something. Because it's like a lot of the stuff that we do maybe in those situations, that it feels like it's productive, but it probably isn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think that's the thing, is that it does actually come from a kind of overall societal pressure that you should be busy, you should be productive, you should be pushing yourself harder. Yeah, so it's not like a criticism of people, it's more like an observation. And I noticed it. And I'm not saying I'm completely impartial to it. It happens to, I do still experience it. It depends where I am and who I'm with. And but when we're in this bothy in Scotland, I remember hearing my friends saying, "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. We've got all this time," because we just sat in this bothy and it was raining outside. And he was like, "I should have brought a book." And there was all this kind of like dialogue going on, and I was just thinking, "This is ace! Like, we can just sit in a bothy and listen to the." And he had brought some cards, and we played cards for a bit, but it turned out that we both kind of had a nap. And but before you know it, 6 hours had passed, and it was so beautiful that we didn't have any sort of access to our phones. And it was so lovely to then see him relax. Fell asleep next to the wall, and he'd been resisting, saying, "No, I can't have a nap because then I'll feel terrible." Like, there's all this stuff going on, isn't there, inside of us? But then actually,
absolutely,
if you let it, it's amazing what can happen. And it might just be the deepest rest you've had in a month.
Yeah. So often it is, just sort of relinquishing that resistance and being like, okay. And then your body's like, oh, right, now I can finally rest. I can finally give you what you need in order to feel a bit better. Like, yeah, absolutely. This has been so lovely, Sarah. This, I had a great time having this conversation.
Me too.
What is there anything that you'd like to, maybe point people towards, or how can people connect with you?
Well, I mean, if it's just a case of saying, "Oh yeah, that's been my experience too," or just like a kind of, I'd love to hear from people. I've got my website, which is abouttheadventure.com, and people can have a look on there. And I've got quite some really nice podcasts on there, which are interviews with people who have experienced big changes in their lives, but again through that perspective of slow, gentle change rather than just kind of taking the leap type of thing, and how nature has helped them. So I'd love to hear from people, whether it's through my website or through my Instagram account. I love to connect. And I mean, I love your podcast is amazing, and that's how I originally came to contact you, because I felt that your podcast, well, I just really appreciated how you asked your questions, and also that you're such an attentive listener, and it does feel like an exploration. You haven't got a particular agenda with your podcast. And so I think it's nice for us as podcast hosts, isn't it, to hear from people, even if it is just, "Oh, I really connected with that, with what you were saying," or "I'd love to hear more about that," because it's we're both on a journey, aren't we? Like, in our separate lives with our work and with our projects. And that's what I feel with you, is that you're sharing parts of your journey and bringing other people into that. And I think we're just bringing more people into this like wonderful perspective on life that can be a bit different. So yeah, it's just nice to hear other people's experiences. And
Definitely. Yeah. It's really refreshing, isn't it? And I think, as you say, when you're hosting a podcast, because people will engage with it, they'll be listening out and about, and there's no obvious way to, like, an obvious call to action, or like I'll reply and say enjoyed whatever. So there's often, you might see numbers on the stats on the screen. It's like, there's a lot of people listening, but are they real?
Yeah. And look what can happen, because that was maybe a year ago that I listened to one of your podcast episodes and I was wowed by it. And then I went on to follow your work and listen to your like audio meditations, and that's helped me so much. And then I invited you on my podcast, and now I'm on your podcast, and it's all through a little message on Twitter.
Yeah.
And that is just incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And we've never met in person yet. Yet we can have these really rich conversations. So that's what I think is, and a lot of people who've contacted me about my podcast and said they've liked it, I've then ended up interviewing because they've liked it, because they've been through their own journey of change, and then they've come on and shared theirs. So yeah, I think if people feel drawn to connect with either of us, then please do make that little effort, because I'm sure both of us would love to hear from others.
Imagine that we are, just taking a sip from the water bottle and you're having a cup of tea by your car, whatever, and invite us over. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that kind of, it's that random chance meeting in a virtual sense that, it's amazing what happens. Yeah. Well, Sarah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. It was such a joy to speak with Sarah about adventure and to think about those kind of characteristic elements of what adventure means to me, and to think about what it could mean for each of us. I wonder what kind of makes up your spirit of adventure. I'd love to hear, from you, if there are things that maybe have resonated in what Sarah and I were talking about, or other things that have come to mind as a result of listening to us speak. For me, I think it's definitely having that sense of challenge, sort of going against the grain of what feels easy, but also that spontaneity and that openness. I really love feeling like something unexpected happened, or, in the moment when something kind of left field is going on and unusual dots are being connected. Stumbling on happy accidents. I think about, my relationship with creativity. It's got sort of all these elements of adventure for me. And they're not even necessarily happy accidents, but things that make for weird and wonderful detours and stories to talk about, to share, to write about. That idea resonated too, that relationship between creativity and the things that we do, the physical activities and experiences that we have, writing about those things afterwards, using adventure as inspiration for me, music and songs, and letting the adventure live on through the creative process. And I think actually I'm going to play out this episode with a song that came from that kind of place for me, after a conversation. Some of you will know this story. A conversation with a French guy that I met in a sauna in Stockholm, in Sweden, back in 2010. We were grounded because of that volcano in Iceland that erupted, and this giant ash cloud sort of descended over Europe and grounded all the flights and stopped us from getting home. We found ourselves in this situation. A lot was lost in translation, but the gist was this guy had recently got divorced and had been in what sounded like a very toxic relationship where he was basically forbidden from traveling, and he loved to travel before this, and And so this trip to Sweden was part of a larger tour that he was doing, and it was the first time that he had travelled since his relationship had ended. And so he was kind of in this slightly tentative state. He was, in this place of really enjoying that freedom of traveling, but was also very uncertain about what that meant, and kind of nervous about it. So little did I know I was actually seeing a slight premonition for my own future, let alone writing a song about it. And the song is called Traveller, and it's on my Year Zero album. And before I play it, I just want to tell you a bit more about the workshop that I mentioned before I shared the conversation I'm doing with Kendra next week. So it's happening on Tuesday, July the 16th, 2024. And I'll just read out some of the blurb that we had written associated with it. So stories have sat at the heart of human cultures throughout history. We use them as sources of entertainment, information, and education. They help us develop, stay safe, and understand ourselves and our world. Culture influences the stories we tell, and the way we tell stories shapes culture. But it's not just the content of these stories that matters. Their structure impacts how we relate to ourselves and other people, our worldviews, and our personal values. So what happens when a culture's prevailing approach to telling stories is infused with toxic features? How does the negativity impact people's perceptions of themselves and their lives? How can we tell our stories in ways that heal rather than harm? These questions gave rise to this courtyard workshop with Kendra Patterson. Kendra is an author, social scientist, and presenter of Stepping Off Now, a podcast about doing creativity in your own way. She recently shared a fascinating episode about the calming effects of Kisho Tenketsu, a Japanese narrative structure distinct from the 3-act structure typical of Western storytelling. I was listening in my car, broken down on the side of a busy road at the time. The episode helped me in that moment. It was comforting, inspiring, and a catalyst for a deep surge of creative energy. In fact, it put words to something that's been on my mind for many years. Why so many of our stories, or our readings and interpretations of them, revolve around big conflict, division, destinies, and the elevation of individual heroes and villains. Kisho Tenketsu integrates reality and explores meaningful paths with the ordinary quietness and mundane happenings of everyday life. By contrast, the hero's journey requires conflict with reality and uses the external world, successfully slaying goals, acquiring objects, overcoming obstacles, etc., as the source of life's meaning. So our common cultural story structures impacts how we decide what to do and why. Our capacity for integrating unexpected events, situations, and invitations, collective values, assumptions, and judgments about human worth. When Kendra and I chatted about this topic, it occurred to us that we might not be alone in our desire for an alternative to the toxicity of the hero's journey. So we're creating space to explore it with others. And we'd love you to join us for this 90-minute workshop in which we will consider how to use the Kisho Tenketsu story structure to develop a healthier and more balanced relationship with life's twists and turns. The workshop will include short talks, reflective exercises, and opportunities to share and respond in the group. The structure, kind of a 3-part structure to it, ironically. The first part will be, Kendra's going to introduce the idea, the structure of Kisho Tenketsu, and share some of the familiar examples that we might know in storytelling. And then we'll do a short exercise to, kind of bring it into our own experience, bring it into an application in our own lives. And then in the second part, I'll introduce the hero's journey, talk a little bit about that and some examples that we might think of in modern culture, and consider the influence of the hero's journey on our judgments, on our feelings, on our aspirations, and the way that we hold those things. And then we'll do another exercise as we reflect on the way that the hero's journey has maybe very subtly influenced the way that we hold ourselves and hold the things that matter to us in life, and some of the negative impacts of that on our relationship, internal relationship, and even the way that we might judge ourselves and others. And then we're going to kind of bring it into hopefully a positive space where we're going to deconstruct some of the core elements of the hero's journey and consider what a Kisho Tenketsu paradigm shift could look like in the stories that we live and tell. So we're going to bring it back round and think, okay, how might we hold certain parts of our lives or certain experiences that we have through a Kisho Tenketsu lens rather than a hero's journey lens, and what difference might that make to our well-being, to our sense of self, and all of that kind of thing. And so we've talked about this, potentially being the first in a series of sessions on this topic, because I think there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to explore. There are a lot of potential avenues that we can go down. And so if there's an appetite for it, we're very open to doing more of it. So it's a free workshop that you can find. If you go to the Haven, the-haven.co, it's on the events calendar there. You'll find it there. I'll put a link in the show notes as always as well. And it will be recorded. So it's at 7 p.m. UK time, which is 2 p.m. Eastern, I believe, in the US. And it's going to be recorded. So if you can't make it, the recording will be available for a week after the event for those who are registered for it, and also to Haven members after that. So if you're a paid Haven member, you'll be able to get hold of it beyond that 7 days. Great. Well, as promised, I'm going to play out the episode with my song Traveller. So if you've not heard it before, I hope you enjoy it. You can hear the whole album. It's the last track off Year Zero. Wherever you listen to music, you can hear it. So just search for Year Zero, Atlum Schema, ATLUM, SCHEMA, and you should be able to find that wherever it is that you listen to your music. Cool. All right. Well, I will be back again soon with another episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until then, do remember that you are an artist. The world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Bye-bye.
Stake a claim, destroy my name with love. Fake the same old stupid game and run. I'm a traveler who's scared to move. A traveler I'm a traveler who's scared of moving on. Sliding pieces fall to bits and fall. The right tide circles that shelter from the storm. I'm a traveler who's scared to move. Traveler, I'm a traveler who's scared of moving on. I'm a traveler who fears what might go wrong. I'm a traveler who's scared to move along. I'm a traveler